Alright then, so good morning, good evening, good afternoon, folks. Name's Jake Keltham, welcome back. And today, now that I'm back from my wonderful hiatus, needed the R&R, time to talk about Ridley Scott's Alien. Of course, the 1979 sci-fi horror classic about a crew of a salvage ship in space that is terrorized by an alien menace once one of their crew becomes physically attached to one of these strange creatures once they land on a planet of which they are receiving a signal from. Now, this is one of those staples of science fiction, of horror, and there's a good reason why. One, this film is probably one of the most atmospheric horror films you'll ever see. Visually, it is insane. A fusion of the biomechanical design work of the legendary artist H.R. Giger, as well as the more industrial stylings of conceptual artist Ron Cobb, with an intermediary between the two being French legend Mobius. Just the very design of the world created in Alien is just absolutely insane. Also aided by the wonderfully handled miniature effects that have a lived-in feel to them. They look like they've existed for quite some time. The refinery, the ships, it all looks very realistic. But also has a unique, style to them. A very, geometric style, for lack of a better word. Just visually speaking, just in terms of the concepts and what's created out of those concepts, this film is just stunning to look at. Aided also by a subtle use of art direction in which there is a lot of blue in this film. This film is just, the main color of this film is the color blue. Whether it is in the Nostromo, the spaceship that our crew inhabits, or whether it is the blue mist that Kane, played by John Hurt, encounters on the planet, or just the blue mist you see on the planet in general. This is a very cool looking film in the, color sense. Now, mentioning cast, this is a well-cast film, with a bevy of character actors and just a wonderful sense of camaraderie amongst the group. Everyone feels like they have been in this world for quite some time, and it sells the reality of the situation very well. Of course, my personal favorite actors are of course, Sigourney Weaver, Ian Holm, and the late Sir John Hurt and Harry Dean Stanton. These are just wonderful talents that are completely invested in their roles alongside the rest of the cast. Everyone feels completely into what's going on. They realize what's at stake. They realize the nature of their problem. It is just stunning just to watch this level of just quality acting in what could have devolved into basically a schlock fest, for lack of a better word. Also, what helps is the fact that the Dan O'Bannon script is comprised of a lot of very, realistic dialogue. Yeah, I seem to be talking about realism a lot, which is kind of weird considering how fantastic a lot of the film looks. What with Giger's very surreal sense of design, particularly with the alien creature itself, which plot twist features certain makeup effects helmed by Italian legend Carlo Rambaldi. That actually kind of caught me off guard once I discovered that Rambaldi had actually done work on Alien. I'm just like, this blew my mind. But that's the great thing about Alien, is it's this very strange balance between a realistic lived-in world and the surreal nature of what's occurring with the alien, the strange derelict spaceship on this alien planet, and just all of these strange creatures and all these strange designs. It's a really well-handled balance. What's also really well-handled is, of course, the creation of tension. Now, many people have described this film as like a haunted house film in space, and to that I definitely concede it does feel like that. There are these, shots of just people walking through these corridors. A lot of them are always alone. And of course, in this case, the ghost spirit, whatever the heck's after them, is a giant alien. And just the way Ridley Scott handles these scenes is very, very impressive, in my opinion. He is able to create this tension through a lot of ambiance, through a lot of sound design, sparing use of Jerry Goldsmith's score. And what we get are these really tense and riveting scenes, such as the one of the big scenes, of course, being near the end. Of course, I'm not going to spoil exactly how this film ends, but the way things are shot, the way things are handled, the tension, you could see on Sigourney Weaver's face throughout the duration of this finale as she's darting through corridors, basically being the only one on the ship outside of course, the alien. It's one of those strange things where just like, if you want to learn visual filmmaking, watch Alien. It's one of those things where just like, how I learned visual filmmaking, I watched films you wouldn't expect me to learn on how to handle visual filmmaking. But Ridley Scott is a very visual filmmaker with Alien. He definitely knows how to create atmosphere and tension through camera placements, through these great tracking shots. The DP knows what he's doing because, you have all the sets just look absolutely impressive, grand as they are claustrophobic. It's just, this is another one of those hard films that I have problems reviewing just because it's one of those things where I'm just like, just go see the damn thing. You have to see it in order to believe it. I mean, another thing that I also want to note is that when I mentioned Jerry Goldsmith's score back there, Goldsmith turns in a knockout here. I just wish there was more of what he had originally intended, which was a slightly more romantic take on space, only to be subverted once the alien elements come into play, as opposed to the more on-the-nose approach that director Ridley Scott and editor Terry Rawlings wanted to do, which was basically purely avant-garde, top to bottom, nothing remotely romantic outside of course, the finale, which uses Howard Hanson's Second Symphony. So, I just wish there was more of it because his original theme for Alien was gorgeous. Just downright gorgeous, and it would have worked well alongside the various motifs he had created, like the time motif, the various delay effects, in which everything's being run through an echoplex. I wish there was more of what he had originally written, because this film could use more of what he originally written. But just, once more, this is one of those films where I'm just like, just go watch it. The only thing I would caution you about is if you like your sci-fi fast and loose, essentially, which is your sci-fi and your horror just fast-paced, just really tightly paced. Because Alien is a slow simmer and build-up to an explosive climax. A long, explosive, tedious, frightening climax that just is dripping with paranoia. So, essentially, Alien is kind of the thinking man's horror film in the sense that it uses it's more atmospheric as opposed to on-the-nose jump scares left and right. Even the gore is kind of sparing, outside of course, the famous set piece with John Hurt and his beloved, world-renowned chestburster, which of course surprised everyone on the cast because only Scott, the makeup people, and Hurt knew about what was going to happen for that scene, how it was going to go down, just to get the genuine reactions of fear, horror, and shock from the rest of the cast. it's one of those films that is very moody. It's dripping with dread. It's a very nihilist film as well, considering how the gag with a lot of these, 80s, late 70s, 80s horror films, of course, everyone dies! Which, not saying that's gonna be too much of a spoiler when most people call this a haunted house film in space. But definitely, it is one of those more moodier, more nihilistic, visually stunning, and audio-wise, downright delectable, as weird as that sounds. So just to conclude, there's a reason why Alien is a classic. It is very realistic in its representation, in its designs, in its character interactions, in its direction, in its visual style, as well as the script, all treat this film with a great sense of reality, but also through this bizarre score from Goldsmith and the bizarre biomechanical designs of Geiger, there's this great surrealistic sense that ultimately gives way to pure, unadulterated fear towards the latter half of the film. It's just such a brilliantly conceived piece of horror and science fiction. It's just downright fascinating just to watch. I can't do it justice. This is my biggest problem with it. I can tell you the cast is stellar. Scott knows how to direct. The visual design work, the conceptual artistry that went into this, as well as the DP work, Rawlings' very sharp editing. I could tell you all of this stuff, but like with most films, you just have to see this to believe it. So, hands down, if you like science fiction, if you like horror, and if you don't mind your films to build up for a nice payoff, as opposed to simply going right out of the gate hacking and slashing, Alien is the film for you. And even if it's not, give it a shot. You might be surprised. Well, with that said, things should be back to business as usual, and every Saturday here, expect some random film I pull out of my delightful pile back here for your viewing pleasure. And, I don't know, maybe I'll actually land on something I can't say too many good things about. I mean, to be honest, I've kind of been using this series just kind of to talk about the films I like to watch. I will concede that there are always flaws with many of them, but I've never really outright hated a film, for the most part. Might be able to change that, but who knows at this rate. Alright, thanks for watching. Catch you later.